Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Smarketing Show. We are back. Rick and I are back with Christina and Tommy from VoyAIge Strategy. Welcome, guys. Today, we're going to chat about AI policies and why you need them. And this is kind of spawned out of conversations with our clients about why do they need one? Can they just go ahead and print one from ChatGPT and etc. And I know that makes your hair curl. So we're going to talk about that today. So anyway, welcome. We're happy to have you.
Yeah, we're happy to be back. Thank you, Melissa.
Thanks.
Hey, good to see you guys. Now, what spawned this topic, Melissa, was, hey, Tommy and Christina have awakened me, right? The typical sales guy. There actually need to be some guardrails on AI. And since you guys, enlightened me that you do need an AI policy, which we'll talk about today, I was talking to a business leader in Chicago. They got a few hundred employees. This lady was actually in human resources, and I said, hey, how are you guys set for an AI policy? And it was like I spooked her, and she stopped dead on the call and said, this was a Zoom call. I could see her facial expression, like I'd exposed her. And she said, and I said, okay, well, a lot of organizations are thinking about this now. And so that awakened me to the gap because, our organization is a digital marketing agency. We play with AI all the time. And we're integrating into our workflows, our methodology. And until we talked to you two, I'll be honest, I wasn't thinking about an AI policy, but when we onboard employees, we got policies we walk through. And I thought in today's episode, it may be enlightening to other people like me, business owner that aren't thinking about this and why they need one. So Tommy or Christina, maybe you guys had a similar experience with other business leaders you're talking to.
Yeah, it's an eerie echo, actually, Rick. We have a client in New York City with about 500 employees. We had a conversation with him recently. And this is a C-suite guy that's in charge of legal everything at his company. And he had shared that another C-suite executive at the company had ambitiously brought in an AI solution for all of his sales folk. And this is kind of the way things are going for most clients these days. Why wouldn't you want to empower your people with tools that can make them more creative? But when your legal people don't know about it, it makes them sweat. And I know this because Christina is a lawyer and I know what triggers her, right? So when, for example, if this client were to have employees use the AI in a way that could circumvent or run into a law or something like that in New York City, or in the United States, or even if you have clients overseas, if it puts you into the purview of the European Union's GDPR, that's a lot of risk that the legal person wouldn't know about. And so it's really easy for an AI policy to sort of prevent this kind of problem from happening by saying, like, hey, let's just get aligned on what you can and can't do when you bring AI into the company, and maybe tell your other business leaders that you're doing it first.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there's someone listening right now going, okay, great, but why do I need one? Like, can you two see it from a different lens than I do? And I think it's really important to bring your perspective into, and this is why I wanted to have you guys on the podcast, right? So why does someone need one? Like, what's the urgency around it with all the priorities I've got or people have got in their business right now?
Well, I've got one. A major drawback would be that you could be facing litigation woes. I mean, if you do not have a policy and procedure in place at all, then who knows what's happening and who knows what rules are being violated. If you do have one that's not kept current, then you could also be behind the times and not up to snuff when it comes to what the law is right now and what you need to be aware of and what rules you need to be complying with. If you don't have that, then there could be various litigation suits. For an example would be recently the New York Times actually sued OpenAI for scraping without consent or compensation, numerous, like their whole archives of all their stories that were clearly copyrighted. There's no question that they were. And there's a big suit going on right now. That's just one example. I don't know if they do have any policies at OpenAI. Maybe they do, but it's not really as strong as it needs to be. Or maybe they don't have one at all and they just said, let's not worry about complying with the rules. these are not good strategies at all. It's highly recommended that there be a policy in place where it is compliant with various laws, including intellectual property ones that
Mhm.
are triggered with the New York Times lawsuit.
Interesting. So I mean, Tommy, you got a lot of business experience in the private sector as a consultant guy and all that stuff. Like, yeah, I think most people are naive to this. And although you've coached me on how there's legislation over in Europe right now, it hasn't quite landed here on our shores yet, but it's coming. And I think you guys are ahead of the curve at VoyAIge Strategy, what you guys do. But do you want to speak quickly to Tommy, the person that's thinking like, why do I need one? Because coming up, we'll
Yeah.
talk about why not to use a template. And
Mhm.
then I think you guys will actually, if you're okay, walk us through kind of how an AI policy is created. Is that okay with you guys?
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, of
Walk us-
course.
Because I think people need to see kind of the structure, the methodology to understand it. But
Mhm.
why
Definitely.
do you think, Tommy, people, need an AI policy as a priority?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I really appreciated you referencing, this like analogy of coaching. I've been coaching Rick a little bit on the law, channeling my inner Christina to talk about AI legislation around the
You
world.
heard her passion.
Yeah, no kidding. Like it's
I've got
spot
one.
on. It's spot on because Rick, when I talk to clients about why policies are needed, I generally talk about two things. I don't talk about just about policies. I talk about policies and procedures. And sometimes I use a similar sports analogy where I say, like, a policy is like having rules. If a sport didn't have rules, what's going to happen? You're going to have a bunch of athletes get out onto a field and they're not going to know where the out of bounds are. They're not going to know how to play the game. The referees are going to run around wildly. The coaches are going to stand on the sidelines and they're all going to be confused. A policy gives your organization rules. It gives guardrails. As you used the analogy earlier, Rick and Melissa, it's a very, very good one. The procedures is how to play the game. What do you do once you get your players out on the pitch? How do you stand at the plate? How do you hold the bat? How does the pitcher deliver a pitch? What counts as a strike and whatnot? When you have policies and procedures in place, what you're allowing your organization to do is understand what not to do
Mm.
and how to do it best once you figure out how to move forward. So this is again a conversation that we often have with our clients, and we often hope that they happen to like sports because the analogy sticks a lot better when they're familiar with what I'm talking about.
For sure.
It's a good one. And again, we work with a lot of sales and marketing people, which tend to be a little creative and, they leave their rule book at home in the morning and fly by the seat of their, what. And so, today's probably more targeted at a business leader that wants to mitigate risk associated with this thing. It's, I equate it to almost the BYOD, like bring your own device to work. Now people are
Mhm.
creeping in. Tom, you gave me a stat a while ago that I got some heat over on social media that 56% of businesses are using AI. I would argue that stat's low, by the way, if you took into account all employees, and only 17% have a policy. But the mindset I think still out there is, hey, okay, I watched this podcast. These, Tommy and Christina seem legit. Why don't I just go to my peer, my buddy in a trade association or a like business, or
Mhm.
even go to ChatGPT and just, put a prompt in there to give me an AI policy. Like, I think that's the mindset if someone's awakened to this. Now,
Mhm.
you two speak as educated people on this topic, why a template or a knockoff from somebody else may not be maybe the key to fits the lock type of thing.
And
Oh gosh, yeah.
you know what? Can
Sorry.
I
This is
interject
a
with
big one.
something?
Please do. Yeah, because
This
this is
is
a big
this
one.
is a good one. And Rick, you talk about that stat that you took some heat for, right? Of who's using AI within your organization. We had a conversation about a situation in an account, okay, with someone who's looking at getting an AI policy, who they said, you asked the question, how many people internally are using AI? And he said, maybe just a couple that I'm aware of. But I don't know what other people are doing. But this is
Come
our paid accounts. True story.
Okay.
Was this not
Okay.
a true story, Tommy and Christina? And so I think that's
Yeah.
really interesting because the company might be only paying for a couple licenses to an OpenAI or a Jasper or a Claude or whatever AI subscription service, right? But what are people paying for personally and possibly uploading company information to? I
So
mean,
this,
maybe this is a whole other
yeah,
thing, but
mhm.
could they be even getting these template policies for their little divisions, right? Without anybody knowing.
It's possible. But I mean,
Mhm.
before we get into templates, let's just talk about what's at stake when you don't know who in your organization is using AI,
Mhm.
right? If you if you ask, and this was an amazing conversation that we had, right?
Mhm.
Where we talk about this account, there's this client, and they don't seem to be really aware of how many people in the organization are using AI. And we're not talking about a company that's paying for licenses for everybody. We're talking
Mhm.
about people that have like a family chat GPT or Claude, right?
Right.
And it's on your phone, it's accessible. So they come in and over their lunch break, they know that the meeting where they have to present the next day about cross-selling because a product isn't doing so well needs a little bit of extra oomph. And so they enter in some ideas
Mhm.
into their phone and they get some amazing feedback. So let's imagine a world where you and your top three competitors are all doing the same thing. You all have that same kind of employee that's having a hard time cross-selling or upselling, and they're using their family subscription AI. They're all using Cloud or Chat GPT, excuse me, and they're all giving IP away. They're all giving really creative, amazing ideas or names of clients or budgets or prospective ideas for selling down the road. When those ideas are entered into an AI model, they help make the AI model stronger. If you go onto your chat GPT right now, one of the very first prompts you'll get on your screen is to say, please be aware, anything and everything that you give us,
Mhm.
we're going to train off of. And
Mhm.
so those data points become property
Mhm.
of that company that's providing that AI. So, without being aware of those people that are sweating over lunch to get ready for that meeting in 2 days, they're all giving away their secrets to those models. And a policy can really, really help prevent this or at least put some rules in place, Melissa. Like, for example, sanitize the name of your clients.
Mhm.
Always make sure you're removing the name of your clients. Give ballpark financial estimates and cost estimates and not specific numbers that can be used to cross-reference and de-anonymize a client by an AI provider. So policies can really, really help with this stuff. I know we've been really excited to talk about why not to use a template, Melissa, but I really wanted to get that out there, that
Yeah, no,
policies
thank
can
you.
really help
Thanks.
mitigate problems like this.
Rick just twigged me to it just based on that stat. So,
Well, Melissa, I would equate it to, so Tommy and Christina, when COVID hit,
mhm.
every sales organization we deal with was like, whoa, I got to work from home now. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And so LinkedIn, the adoption of LinkedIn, for example, took off. And so since then, we've coached thousands of B2B salespeople how to use LinkedIn. But what I found was nobody had a LinkedIn policy. In other words, so reps, to your point, with no rules, they would post stuff maybe on negative comments about a competitor or what we suggest anyway. Stay
Yeah.
away from political, stay away from certain things that may alienate your
Right.
customers. They didn't know because they were naive. And I would equate that to what you're talking about. It's naivety that is a big problem here. And,
Mhm.
and I laughed when you said they thought only a few people in their company had, like,
He said two, and they have
okay,
500 people.
well, I think I know
Well,
the company and I would not add a
the
couple
study that
zeros.
we
Yeah,
referenced recently, Rick, when we talked about the number of
yeah,
employees in the United States right now that
yeah,
are using AI at work, it's over 50%. That's dated.
yeah.
Mm,
That if you were to update that study now, I would imagine it's closer to 60%, maybe even north of 70.
yeah, and probably changes weekly,
Probably changes weekly.
based on adoption and
Yeah.
yeah.
So you guys, the backlash I got on that post around 56% of companies using AI, 17% of a policy was that I think the person that, and I respect this person that commented, I think they took it like I was trying to put a big bit in the mouth of their
Mm,
creative team and rein them in. Like, we're big sponsors of AI. I think
that's
you're
right.
just saying have some guardrails like in place, and nobody's doing that right now because it's so new.
Mhm.
And
If I
they're going
could
to these
just say,
templates. Yeah.
like, it's best not to use a template because you need to tailor the policy to the particular organization. So not every organization needs the same policy. They're all going to be slightly different, and you need to address that. And if you're just taking one off the internet or asking ChatGPT for the answer, ChatGPT is not going to know. And you need to tailor whatever is, put out by a chatbot.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I'll second Christina's sentiments, right? Like the elephant in the room is this template question. And just to validate quickly, Rick, nobody is not endorsing AI here, especially at VoyAIge Strategy. We love
Yeah.
AI. I use AI every day. I can't imagine functioning in business without it, if I'm being completely honest. It makes my life a lot easier, makes my wife's life a lot easier, because when we're looking for ideas
Mhm.
on how to make a meal with a limited number of ingredients in the fridge, AI is amazing. And I
Mhm.
encourage any organization to think really seriously about what it means to bring AI in to streamline operations, to generate new creative ideas. AI is amazing for that. All we're suggesting is to put some guardrails around it so you don't expose yourself to risk. And one of those risks, like Christina was talking about, is what happens when you use this kind of template approach. And I'm going to give you a really common example that we see.
Mhm.
A lot of AI templates ask AI to prioritize cost saving strategies in any way, shape, or form in an organization. Now, let's say your organization values customer loyalty and retaining long term customers. If you bring in an artificial intelligence product that is governed by a piece of AI policy that prioritizes cost savings, what we often see, guys, what we often see in those templates is that AI is encouraged to let go of those conversations with those customers quickly in order to save money. So now what ends up happening is that you've introduced more work and more lag for your organization, because your sales and your marketing people have to go back and rekindle and protect and re-nurture those relationships, because an AI model had said, hey, instead of investing that time in an extra phone call to figure out why we couldn't close that sale, just let it go because it's going to save you more money. This is just one example
Mhm.
of what Christine is talking about. The model of the AI that's being used is only going to reflect what rules it's given. And if it doesn't understand the priorities and the needs and the risks and the strengths and weaknesses of your organization, it's going to miss really, really important shape and really important nuance. Anytime we hear anybody talk about using AI policy templates, we really encourage them to pause and have a conversation with us about
Mhm.
what is it that you are concerned about losing if you bring AI in. And that's usually enough to have a meaningful conversation about why templates don't work.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, Tommy, we created a ChatGPT powered chatbot for a website, and the prompting we had to go through was very deep in terms of making sure that the
I
corporate
bet it was.
priorities, like the voice of the
Yeah.
tone of the tonality, because
Mm.
you're really almost coaching a child to talk and act the way you want it to act at the family outing, we'll call it. And if it doesn't know, it's supposed to wear clothes, or it doesn't know it's not supposed to, whatever, like these things, because we had to put a release on the website saying anything that basically the bot says, we're not responsible for. But I mean, bringing it back though, I think the template thing, you make a good point on, your company is unique the same way I wouldn't wear a suit jacket that you have a different size, different length, everything's got to be custom tailored, I think, a little bit to the company. And that's why I was looking forward to kind of, you guys walking us through how do organizations, or how would an organization, how do you guys create like an AI policy? Like what's involved in creating one? Because I think that's what a lot of people, it's behind the curtain right now to them, and they don't know how to do one.
Yeah, I got a deck here that I want to share with you guys. You
All
okay if I
right.
hit screen share?
Yeah,
Now, as a
100%.
former professor, am I supposed to say yes at this point?
No, when I take a break, you go and buy me a coffee. You can have a snooze at the back of the
And when
class
you
while I
say
keep
deck,
blabbering
how
on.
many slides is that?
No more than 5.
Everybody get a coffee.
And let me pull a Gen Z for my kids. Am I allowed to have my phone out while you're listening to me?
Just this time, Rick. I'll let you have it one time.
They've actually implemented policies in high schools where students shouldn't have their phones. But anyway, that's a whole other
Put
story.
it in a basket at the door.
Yeah.
At VoyAIge Strategy, we have a two-pronged approach. I'm going to be the master of the slides, and I'm going to let Christina do all of the talking.
Absolutely. So, like Tommy said, we have two main stages. The first one is called review and report. And in this one, we review what you have right now. So the existing policies and procedures. And then we, after looking at everything, we make a report on what we think the company needs. So we make our recommendations. And then the second stage is draft and deploy. And in this stage, we take the report we just made and we revise any existing policies or make brand new ones depending on the situation. So if we dive deeper into stage one, the first step is just assess the existing policies and procedures. We try to understand what's going on here, what the goals are, what's happening. Next
So
step is
Christina, sorry to interrupt. You look at all the existing policies within the company, not existing AI policies, obviously, to understand the DNA of the policies in place. Is that right?
yeah,
You know what I'm asking? Like you guys would look at other policies on different subject matter and then
absolutely.
to anchor into what the kind of vibe of the company is, we'll call it, to then create the AI policy so it's a sister, not a distant cousin to the existing policies. Is that right?
Absolutely,
Okay.
because they all have to be one cohesive unit. They all
Mhm.
have to be
Okay.
consistent with each other, right?
Okay.
The second step is to review business plans and make sure there's alignment for the same reason that we were just talking about. All the existing policies and procedures have to come together and all align. Step three is we analyze best practices in your industry. And step four is we note applicable law, policy, and ethics that would be in this kind of the foundation of the policy. So what would apply here? Because we're going to embed all those things into the final output. Step five
Can
is
I just ask a question? Sorry, Christina, about step 4. So the applicable laws, ethics, and policies. So what would pertain in terms of the state they're possibly in or region, etc.? Is that
when
sort
it
of?
comes to law,
Mhm.
specifically, that is very based on jurisdiction.
Got it. Okay.
So, especially when it comes to privacy and AI, because every state seems to have something a little bit different. There's no national privacy law or AI law.
Mm,
So, states kind of are in different stages of getting to where they want to be. Some have no laws, some have very, certain states, for example, California, New York, they have very detailed laws. So, it depends where you are, what
right.
applies.
So another good reason to have an AI policy,
Yes,
given,
yeah, because you
right?
want to be compliant, like we were
Yeah.
talking about before. We want to avoid any problems, right?
Yes. Yes.
I think,
So,
if I may interject here, the key words that are most important are standards and norms.
Mm,
And we talk about law, ethics, and policy as a company at VoyAIge Strategy. What we mean by that is we look at your industry, we look at your market, and we look at what's normal. We try to understand what the standard practices are.
mm.
And that gives us a baseline. We get to get a sense of what it is that everybody else is doing. And that way we can find where your competitive edge can exist.
Okay, great.
So Christina's given some really great examples, but it's really important to us that we understand what kind of laws your competitors are looking at, what
Hmm.
their ethical landscape looks like, and what kind of policies that they're using. That's how
Great.
we make yours better.
So can you help a company with a competitive edge versus competitive landscape that doesn't have a policy? AI policy?
When we come into the company and we look at what existing policies and procedures you have, we then see if you have nothing and you need a brand new one, or if you have something that needs to be enhanced.
Mm.
It depends on the situation.
So from a business competitive edge standpoint that you brought up, Tommy, what I'm seeing people start to investigate is, okay, so do my vendors have AI policies?
Mm-hmm.
Because my vendors have access to information and data about my company and often my customers. And so they're now I'm seeing starting to go upstream in terms of do the vendors or suppliers you deal with have an AI policy, not just your company. So if you were trying to turn that into a value proposition, it could be argued that if you had three vendors you're looking at and one was we'll call it offered a mature AI policy in place based on their go-to-business model versus others that were still freewheeling, I would argue based on the growth rate of AI, you'd probably feel safer with the one that had a little bit of guardrails on what to do. I'm just throwing that out there as a sales guy.
That makes sense.
Yep.
And there is a policy, like if a company has a policy that they want to make sure third parties
Yeah,
also have a similar policy so that everyone is in compliance all the way through the chain,
Mm-hmm.
then that's what you would do to fulfill your responsibility.
I think you think defensively as a lawyer, Christina. I think offensively. Okay, so I'm just saying that's the difference. No, I'm serious. Like
It's true though.
I would sell. I would be selling them. That's an advantage.
It is,
Anyway,
absolutely.
okay.
Rick,
To remain compliant and
Yeah.
to ensure that everyone that you're dealing with is compliant.
Mhm.
That is something that is important to certain companies. So
Yeah.
you would have that right in your own policy that you would want to make sure
Mhm.
Mhm.
that they are.
Yeah. You
Because
play goal, I'll be out front. Goal.
Rick, what you described to me is slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
Mhm.
Everybody wants AI. Everybody wants to have it in the organization. They want to do it quickly.
Yeah.
And the companies that provide AI allow you to go and sign up with a credit card. You could do it faster than you can listening to me finish the sentence. It's very, very easy. But if you do as you say, do a bit of a vendor scan, get a sense of what fits,
Mhm.
you're going to be rolling efficiently once you adopt.
Mm.
And you need the right policies and procedures in place to understand what that process even looks like,
Yeah.
right? We're not saying don't adopt. We're just saying,
Sometimes you got to slow down to speed up, right?
Yep.
thank you. There you go.
Yeah.
right, so all those standards and norms that we just talked about, they would be embedded right in the policy and procedures because you are basing everything in the policy on those standards. Step 5 would be identifying any gaps, any issues or challenges. On the flip side, any opportunities. You just want to understand the whole situation, the whole context in which you're operating. And then lastly, step 6, you would report the findings and recommendations, as well as the action plan, the roadmap, any next steps.
Great.
And what we mean by that, really, the final step that we take in our stage one of generating a new policy or procedure or revising one for your organization is that we give you a report. We give you something that's fun to look at, it's easy to understand, where all of the 6 steps we've talked about are articulated. So you understand what our game plan is and what it is that we want to do for you before we start any of the work. We take that part very seriously.
Right.
All right, so we
So-
move on to the next step.
Yeah. Why don't we actually get into some of the work then, Christina? What do you think?
Absolutely.
So once we deliver that policy and procedure, why don't you guide our listeners through, our viewers, our audience, I should say, as to what our next steps look like?
Sure. So we have that report that we just made. In stage 2, we draft and deploy. That's the first part there, where we draft a new policy if that's what it needs, because there's nothing right now, or revise the existing policy so it's more current and more in alignment with all the other policies and what the goal is for this policy. We submit the draft for approval and for feedback and understanding any concerns. We have a back and forth exchange. And then after that, we submit a final draft for your review or for your approval. And then we plan and publish. And this has a few things. First, we want to give reasonable notice to employees in the company. So you don't just say, surprise, there's a new policy that applies today. You don't do that.
Right.
You have to say, okay, there's a new policy coming, and then this is when it's going to be, that's the planned date for it to take effect, so that there's some notice to the employees so they can adjust. And plus, you have to train the employees.
Mm.
And so to do that, you have to give some time before it takes effect. And you announce it, and then we move on to the next part.
Hmm. Does it make sense why we put emphasis on planning and publishing, Rick and Melissa?
Yeah, I'm wondering how many pages it is.
That's
When
a
you've
good
got
question.
one, because I find today's business people are skimmers, not readers anymore, and
Hmm.
Right.
yeah,
Well, that's how it is. You have to just be concise and get
mm,
everything in that you want to say.
And make it look fun, like you said.
Well, for people like you, Rick, my friend, and for executives and
yeah,
organizations, we produced really two documents. When you get a new or revised policy or procedure, we also give you an overview document that is kind of like your executive summary. Christina, do you want to walk everyone through what
Absolutely.
that looks like a little bit?
Sure. So the overview is not the policy. The overview is for the managers to read and understand. So it's got the background, it's got everything in it that we want. First, there's a summary just explaining what this is. And then the second part is the considerations, like what you need to consider when drafting and creating this policy. Then this is the big part, law, policy, and ethics, like all the things, the standards and norms that we were talking about before, they would go here with some explanatory material that is user-friendly, plain English, so that it's just very clear what applies
Mm.
to you. And then the key inclusions, for example, there could be references like what laws did you use, what policies, and other, ethical guidelines, for example. So it's more of an explanatory thing, not the policy that the employees see. Then we get to the policy, which is the next part, the actual policy. We start with an introduction. This is what the policy is, kind of a thing, brief explanation. Then the purpose. So it just states briefly what the goal of the policy is. And the policy is much briefer than the actual overview, just so you know, it's very concise.
mm,
And the scope is it explains to whom the policy applies. And usually this would be everyone in the workplace, everyone in the company, everyone has different roles and responsibilities, but it applies to everyone. And then there's definitions. So all the terms that are used throughout the policy, you have to explain what that is. And then the procedures. Now, this is a part where, this is the substantive part of the thing where you have to explain a few things. And then we get to, after the procedures that need to be followed, you get to the legal authority and other references that you use, but definitely first is the applicable law, because that is the thing on which the whole policy is based.
Mm.
And then we get to the roles and responsibilities. This is also a very substantive section because it's by type of actor in the workplace. For example, HR managers, supervisors, employees themselves have responsibilities under the policy. So you need to explain all those things and make it very clear. These are the things you need to do. And if there are any checklists or forms or things that certain managers or supervisors need to use or complete during the procedure for them, like to fulfill their roles and responsibilities, they have to do those things. And then the next step would be the appendix. And that's where you would put all the forms and checklists, anything that people use in this policy, that's where you put them, just so it's very clear what is happening and what is required, so that everyone is on the same page and understands what they need to do and what they are not allowed to do. That would all be in there. So that's the main things in the overview and the policy itself.
yeah. I like the way you guys laid it out.
Hmm.
Once we deliver an overview of the work that we've done so that the executives and the managers and the directors in your organization understand the critical work that had been done. Once the policies and procedures are given to your organization, there are three things that we recommend that organizations do after the fact. Because plain and simple, the work doesn't stop there. There is a little bit more to consider in terms of ensuring the health and longevity of the policies and procedures that we developed for you guys. So, Christina, would you mind walking through those three recommended steps for us?
Sure. So first, we need to train the employees so that they all understand what the policy is and what it requires when it comes to acceptable uses and unacceptable uses of AI, etc., and what the responsibilities are, etc. So training is very important, but you can't stop there. You need to test the employees to demonstrate that they understand the policy, and you need to keep records of those tests, like of the
How would you
participant
test somebody? How would you test somebody on that?
multiple choice quizzes so that they
Okay.
understand, and
Okay.
that can be something that's, digital.
Okay.
Sorry about that. It's digital, and it can be done very quickly so that you can
Mhm.
assess
Mm-hmm.
and confirm that they have passed whatever the passing grade is
Mhm.
required. And then you have to sign off. You have to get the employees to sign off on the thing to acknowledge and confirm that, yes, they received this policy, they received the training, and they did do the test, the quiz, so that it's all confirmed and you keep those records for at least 3 to 5 years so that as an employer, the company can say, yes, I did provide this policy and the training and they knew about it, but still they violated it. And then you can then,
Mhm.
in a termination situation, you can say, or a disciplinary situation, you can say, yes, we gave the policy and it was violated. And that's why disciplinary consequences ensued.
Mhm.
You can't do that if you didn't give the policy or you didn't test them or you didn't get them to sign off on it. After the testing and the acknowledging and confirming, you then need to do something very, very important. You need to monitor the policy. And what this means is you have to watch. And if there is a violation of the policy, that's the time to say something. Don't wait until there's gross violations of the policy. And now you're like, oh, it's so bad, we need to terminate this person. You just start right away and just kind of do a warning and say, oh, that's a little bit not in accordance with the policy. Can you make sure you do this with a friendly reminder? And then keep them all in line with in accordance with the policy. So you have to monitor the policy and enforce the policy. And this is giving the disciplinary consequences for violating the policy. And then you need to do regular reviews of the policy. Why would you have to do this? Because law, policy, and ethics, they evolve over time. And when they do this, you need to update the policy and make sure it is kept current at all times. And when there is a change, you need to let the employees know there's been a change here. It takes effect in, I don't know, a month or two, so that you give them time to adjust and receive the training and sign off on it all again. So you have to always review and update.
That's great, Christina. So, if I'm listening, I might be wondering, how long does this process take?
Sure, it takes about a few months. It really depends on how complex the situation is, how big the corporation is that we're dealing with. About a few months.
Okay, great. Awesome.
So just a few months and you're all set.
You're all
Hey,
wrapped up with the
Just
policy.
like
well, no,
that.
I want to close out, Melissa, before we wrap up. First, thanks, Tommy and Christina. You guys obviously see this completely different than probably what most do, and so thanks for your insights today. I know they're grounded in research and experience and all those things. You're not rookies at this, and this is why we wanted to have you on. I would just say, though, to the business leader out there, this is not something strange to your business model. I mean, you've got policies in place for where your employees park. Should an employee be allowed to come in and use the corporate mailing machine to mail something to their cousin in another country? Like, people understand there's a rule in place for a reason. And as AI grows as fast as we think it is, and our digital marketing team showing us stuff right now that we believe this chat GPT is going to overtake Google in the foreseeable future. So this is not a slow creeper. This thing's like a tidal wave coming. And that's why I think you guys are ahead. But if you've got policies in place right now, this is just another layer in addition to what you've got, I think is what you guys are explaining. But in closing, I think Christina, as a lawyer, you look at it defensively, and I look at it more on an offensive opportunity. So, we always try to understand, how do companies make money? Well, they make money by selling things or protecting themselves from, litigation or whatever. But I would argue, if you're a business and you sell something that has anything to do with, data or technology, and you have an AI policy, I would argue that you're strengthening your value proposition versus competition. Because if you're a customer and you looked at, as I said earlier in the program, 3 vendors, 2 of them don't have any AI policy in place, and one does, that's got some guardrails or some protection of how they're going to interface with your data, your customer information. I mean, I think this is going to be a growing a line on the buying criteria, I would argue, in the tech sector where we work. So as much as today you may say, hey, I don't need this for defensive purposes, I would argue that with the clients that you're working with right now, I think there's a huge upside in offensive opportunity through the helmet of a sales guy, we'll call it. Anyway, I just want to say thanks a lot for joining today. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Rick. And like we said early on in the episode, you're the goalie, or you're the goal scorer, and Christina and Tommy are the goaltenders. So we've got all of the areas covered.
Sometimes we get out of the net and we play forward. And just to finish off and saying thank you, Rick, it's a great point. Something that we try to do as an organization is not to just underscore the defensive components of policies and procedures, but you're right, there is an offensive one too. And the key word that comes to me is lockstep. If you get people walking in the same direction, in the same way, and using technology all together in unison, you get efficient, you build really, really good habits. And this is a great way to mobilize a really creative task force, a really creative sales team with really, really good technology. So thanks for reminding us of that, Rick. I think it's really, really
That
good.
was a good
You tell
point.
me a company that their employees don't use a mobile phone and have access to free or paid chat GPT, and they're a target for an AI policy. I would just say,
Right.
So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
those 2 are not going away. Anyway.
This is a great episode. Thanks for your insights. Thanks for coming back. We look forward to next episode, which is authentic thought leadership. So tune in and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.